Today, I am returning to this webpage with its roughly a bazillion questions to ask an atheist, which took me 3 videos to answer and might be responsible for the lethargy I felt over the weekend. It appears on this site, Voice in the Wilderness Ministries, which has this royal lion as its mascot. Symbol? What do you call these gizmos that ministries have? I have no idea. After all those inane questions, the page doesn't end. It adds several paragraphs of atheist bashing to help the Christian in their walk, I guess, and to make sure we all understand that atheists are silly and stupid and need help navigating our own minds, much less this fallen, sinful world. Let's take a look. Hi, my name is Scarlett, and I'm an atheist and skeptic, and I do like reading all the inane things that Christians put on the interwebs to evangelize us, I guess. Questions for atheists are something that are very interesting to me because usually they don't show a real interest in discovering who the atheist is. They are just tools for evangelizing, or more likely keeping Christians with their butts in pews. As I mentioned in my videos answering the questions, the website Voice in the Wilderness was founded by this guy, Philip Del Rey, who passed away in 2021, apparently of ALS. Now I've taken the time to read their speakers page and found out who has taken over the running of the site, even though their info is not on the About page. It is Susan Savitt, Phil's widow, who it says gave her heart to Jesus at age 5 at a Billy Graham outreach. I guess she's thinking this is a good thing, but all I can think of is, man, your mind is not fully formed. You're too young to make any decisions like that. What in the world have you done with your whole life? But hey. It also says that she likes to teach Christian fitness. What in the savory sauce of the flying spaghetti monster is that? And now she's married to this dude, Greg Savitt, a Messianic Jew, who credits Sue with leading him to be a believer in Jesus. So these two are who are keeping up the site now. With all that said, let's get to the atheist bashing. Atheists are not born, they evolve. I bet the person that wrote that thought that they were very clever, since this page makes it clear that they are creationists and don't believe in evolution. But let's go on. People are not born atheists. It is a conscience, not conscious, conscience and deliberate choice to become an atheist, just as one chooses to accept Christ. While some atheists may try to deny it, like it or not, atheism requires faith. It is a belief system, just as any other religion. The atheist has faith alone, through his intellect alone, that God does not exist. All right, everybody, say it with me. Atheism is not a belief system. It is merely the answer to one question, whether or not a deity or deities exist. It's not a religion. Not all atheists claim that God does not exist. A lot simply lack a belief in God. Does not take faith to lack a belief. Of course, we use our intellect to make determinations about what we believe. What are you using? And popping back up to the top, some people are raised atheist and other people fall away from their faith when the claims of their religion fail to meet the burden of proof. So there's so much wrong with this first paragraph. But I sometimes see paragraphs like this as being an admission that Christians really don't have a leg to stand on in defending what they believe. So they want to just say the atheist is just like us. They don't have a leg to stand on. Nobody knows, so anything goes. Let's keep going and see where they go from here. When reasoning with an atheist, we must help them see the obvious fallacies inherent in their faith. Again, it's not a faith. Let's see what kind of fallacies we have. Here is a great point from Ron Rhodes. Have no idea who Ron Rhodes is. I'm not going to look this person up either. You can look him up. I don't care. Bullet point. Some atheists categorically state that there is no God, and all atheists by definition believe it. And yet this assertion is logically indefensible. A person would have to be omniscient and omnipresent to be able to say from his own pool of knowledge that there is no God. Only someone who is capable of being in all places at the same time with a perfect knowledge of all that is in the universe can make such a statement based on the facts. To put it another way, a person would have to be God in order to say there is no God. This is a ludicrous statement. I see this claimed from time to time, but here's the problem. Religions claim that their deities interact with our world in some capacity. There are some Christians who say that they have a relationship with Jesus, and Jesus wants that relationship with us. Some claim that God answers prayers. There are all kinds of claims that can be tested. We don't have to be everywhere to test those claims. Now, if you just have God as the universe or some dumb shit like that, whatever, I don't know what we can do about that. Maybe that God does exist. But most religions make some claim that you can actually examine and evaluate. And again, most atheists don't say there is no God, they just lack belief in one. Again, you don't have to be everywhere and know everything for that. So no, we go on. Questions are better than answers when dealing with difficult and deceived people. This is clearly somebody who's read Paul, right? So a good question to ask is, the Library of Congress has more than 70 million books, most of which were written by scholars? Are and were written by scholars and experts in their fields of academics. Were. What percentage of that information do you think you have in your mind? Whatever there is, you can follow up with, do you think that God may exist outside of your knowledge and experience? Okay, we need some quotations in here. This is a little messy. It's a rhetorical question, but wait for his answer. Of course, it's a he. Then you can ask, if I could show you that it is more rational to believe in God than in no God, would you be willing to look at the evidence? If he says no, then you can gently point out that it is his will, not his intellect, that is the problem. Okay, so I find this to be like such a silly question. Like, of course I don't know pretty much all of the information that is in that 70 million books, but also, of course, God isn't in that information. God should be in the universe. Once again, religious people make claims that God interacts with our world in some way, and we can examine those claims. How is God interacting? Let's go look at what that is. And on this last claim, almost every atheist that I've heard has said, if you can show me evidence that God exists, I will believe. I might not worship that God, but if you have evidence and it is more rational, I'll believe. So we're just setting up a straw man. I know this is supposed to be advice, but it's just really terrible. We're moving on to see where else we go from here. Another common excuse atheists use it, the question of evil. Oh, come on, you all. I mean, I know I make typos and I'm really bad, but there have always been at least two. There was Phil and Susan, and now there's Susan and Greg. Somebody please check the other person's writing. It's just so simple. Okay, so the question of evil. If God is good and all-powerful, why is there so much evil in the world? Many atheists like to use this, but it does not work. I don't know that the question of evil is, why is there so much evil? It is, why is there so much pain and suffering in the world? But let's go back to Ron Rhodes. A good approach to an argument like this is to say something to this effect. Since you brought up this issue, the burden lies on you to prove that evil actually exists in the world. So let me ask you, by what criteria do you judge some things to be evil and other things not to be evil? By what process do you distinguish evil from good? The atheist may hedge and say, I just know that some things are evil. It's obvious. Don't accept such an evasive answer. Insist that he tell you how he knows that some things are evil. He must be forced to face the illogical foundation of his belief system. You know, I know that Christians often think of good and evil sort of as platonic forms or something like that, that it's a force or an energy or, I don't know, something magical that exists. It's what the devil does and good is what God does and things like that. But I think of good and evil as properties of actions. So for me, evil would be really heinous actions that cause excessive pain and suffering, and the person can control it. And I don't know, I'd have to go on a little bit. I'm just going off the top of my head. Good is things that bring happiness and joy and make life better for people and things like that. It's not that there is actually evil or there is good. These are not things. They're not nouns. These are adjectives. And by the way, can I just say, I find the projection really strong because it's Christians that obviously say it's just really obvious what is moral because God has put this in our heart. I have not heard atheists say that things are obvious. They say, well, let's define it. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. We humans, because that's all that we have. So Ron Rhodes, whoever that is, and then these people at Voice in the Wilderness Ministries have not actually spoken with an atheist. My thought is that sometimes they might speak to somebody who hasn't thought about this and who may or may not be an atheist. They just might be some form of Protestant that doesn't have to attend church and is not an evangelical. I don't know. Not everybody has thought about this. If you go on the street, who knows what you'll get. But why don't you talk to somebody who has thought about it? Okay, let's go to the next one. After he struggles with this a few moments, point out to him that it is impossible to distinguish evil from good unless one has an infinite reference point, which is absolutely good. Otherwise, one is like a boat at sea on a cloudy night without a compass, i.e., there would be no way to distinguish north from south without the absolute reference point of the compass needle. Well, way to assume that the person would struggle with this. Like I said, maybe you're talking to somebody who has not thought about this at all, but why don't you try talking with an atheist who has thought about that? There are lots of people on the YouTubes and all over the place that have actually thought about this. But you actually do not need an infinite reference point. You don't need an objective thing. You don't need anything that's absolute. We as humans are capable of sitting down and saying, hey, when we say something is evil, what do we mean by that? What do you think it is? What about this case? What about that? And if we are in good faith and we are sincere in our quest to accomplish something together, we can come up with a system. We don't need some God to tell us this is the system. And by the way, the God of Christianity is not that great of a God. I mean, just read all of the stuff that happens in that book. Okay, let's keep going. The infinite reference point for distinguishing good from evil can only be found in the person of God, for God alone can exhaust the definition of absolutely good. Look, we don't need absolutely good, and I don't know why we need to exhaust the definition. We come up with some goals, we come up with things that we think, what are good things that we can have happen for people, animals, the world, etc., and what are bad things? We can come up with this. Going on, if God does not exist, then there are no moral absolutes by which one has the right to judge something or someone as being evil. We've already said that's not true. We don't need absolutes, we just need criteria. More specifically, if God does not exist, there is no ultimate basis to judge the crimes of Hitler. Yes, there is. This is dumb. Seen in this light, the reality of evil actually requires the existence of God rather than disproving it. No, you haven't established that. You're just stating these things. These are assertions. We don't need to discuss them anymore. Like we've said, set up your categories, decide what your goals are, decide what you think this is. We as humans can figure it out. Let's keep going. At this point, the atheist may raise the objection that if God does in fact exist, then why hasn't he dealt with the problem of evil in the world? You can disarm this objection by pointing out that God is dealing with the problem of evil, but in a progressive way. I have no idea what that means. Let's see if he explains this. The false assumption on the part of the atheist is that God's only choice is to deal with evil all at once in a single act. Who said that? God, however, is dealing with the problem of evil throughout all human history. Another assertion. One day in the future, Christ will return, strip power away from the wicked, and hold all men and women accountable for the things they did during their time on earth. Justice will ultimately prevail. I thought that people were not going to be judged on their actions. I thought it was they just had to accept Jesus anyway. Those who enter eternity without having trusted in Christ for salvation will understand just how effectively God has dealt with the problem of evil. Okay, so we have to wait, I guess is what you're saying. Okay, let's go on. If the atheist responds that it shouldn't take all of human history for an omnipotent God to solve the problem of evil, you might respond by saying, okay, let's do it your way. Hypothetically speaking, let's say that at this very moment, God declared that all evil in the world will now simply cease to exist. Every human being on the planet, present company included, would simply vanish into oblivion. Would this solution be preferable to you? Why would that be the solution? I mean, I know that God, according to the Bible, drowned everybody on earth because he thought they were evil. Well, except for Noah and his family. And that's a questionable family to save, but whatever. That's our choice. We either have suffering. By the way, it's not evil. We have suffering. That's the problem of evil. Or nobody exists. It's 0 or 100. There's nothing in between there. There's nothing else this omnipotent God could do. I'm just flabbergasted. Flabbergasted that those are the only two things that you think can have happen. I can think of a million things. I could sit here all day, but I won't because this video would take forever. So we're going on. The atheist may argue that a better solution must surely be available. Yeah, no shit. There must be a better solution, just like either life doesn't exist or everybody's evil. All right. He may even suggest that God could have created man in such a way that man would never sin, thus avoiding evil altogether. This idea can be countered by pointing out that such a scenario would mean that man is no longer man. He would no longer have the capacity to make choices. This scenario would require that God create robots who act only in programmed ways. Okay, so besides the fact that lots of Christians say that we really don't have free will, that God is the one that allows us to believe in him and see through sin or whatever, so whatever, there are lots of other solutions than this. By the way, again, it's not that evil exists. It is that there is suffering. So why did God allow natural disasters like tornadoes, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, avalanches, and on and on? There are so many natural disasters that cause suffering and cause early death. There are things like people leave children in cars accidentally. There are things that are accidental. So it's not just that God allows the perpetrators to have free will, and I guess the victims don't have any free will. It is that he allows all kinds of pain and suffering to happen. And this is supposedly the best possible world. So the person that wrote this does not understand the problem of evil. Everybody always goes to like, oh, we need to have people like Hitler because otherwise we'd all be robots. No, there are all kinds of things that God could have done, all kinds of ways that he could have created man. This omnipresent, omnipotent God chose this one. Let's go on. If the atheist persists and says that there must be a better solution to the problem of evil, suggest a simple test. Give him about 5 minutes to formulate a solution to the problem of evil that 1, does not destroy human freedom, or 2, cause God to violate his nature, example, his attributes of absolute holiness, justice, and mercy in some way. After 5 minutes, ask him what he came up with. Don't expect much of an answer. Oh, well, thank you very much. Now, again, if you're talking to somebody who hasn't thought about this, or you've surprised somebody, they might not have an answer. But I can think of things like, you go to do this evil action and it just doesn't work. The action doesn't complete for some way. You've already chosen, like someone chooses to kill somebody, but it just doesn't take, So there are some things that can happen. All right, let's move on. Your goal, of course, is not simply to tear down the atheist's belief system. After demonstrating some of the logical impossibilities of his claims, share with him some of the logical evidence for redemption in Jesus Christ. And the infinite benefits that it brings. Perhaps through your witness and prayers, his faith in atheism will be overturned by newfound faith in Christ. Ah, you sweet summer child, you think that there's logical evidence for redemption in Jesus Christ? What are you going to do, show the Bible? Once again, atheism is not a belief system. What you need to do is demonstrate that your God exists. That's it. One thing that seems to be missing from this page is actually any evidence that God exists or that Jesus was even a real person or anything. It's just taken for granted that it's really obvious. Do you remember that thing that Ron Rhodes said? More like wrong roads, am I right? The atheist may hedge and say, I just know that some things are evil. It's obvious. Well, it looks like the people at this webpage say, I just know that God exists. It's obvious. That's all you need. All right, we're going to end it here. There's a little bit more, but these videos will get too long if I do all of it. They're just like run-on pages, basically. So what did you think? Was any of this convincing at all? What would you answer to some of this? Put it in a comment below. I always love to read your comments. And while you're down there, you can like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff. You're on YouTube, you know what to do. If you like what I do, you can buy me a coffee. That link is in the description below as well. And I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.